Welcome, everybody. Today we have David Gefen to speak about CIS, MIS, and why it's important for CS students.
Yeah. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Professor of MIS. I started my career very much like you guys as a computer science kid. And the reason I'm here is to convince you, hopefully, that you want to augment your education, not only taking computer science classes, but also taking a few management classes, and particularly management of information systems classes. And I'm recommending this because I was in the same position that you guys are in quite a few years ago, but basically, I did my undergraduate in computer sciences and psychology 20-something years ago. Then I went into the industry and I started working. And very quickly I realized when I was in the industry that it's not enough to build brilliant software. It's much more important sometimes to know how to manage a project where it is being implemented. You'll be amazed at how many brilliant software packages are never used. And they're not used because they are not good, rather they're not used because the process in which they were managed, in which they were implemented, was not done correctly. I realized that when I was in the industry and I was running such projects, on both sides, both when they succeeded and when they did not succeed. And one thing that really influenced me earlier on was that software always has bugs in it. By the way, in case you're not familiar with the numbers, for every 1,000 lines of code that you write, by the time it has gone through testing, there are about 2.7 bugs left in it. You're laughing, but I can tell you that consistently over a large number of studies, that's more or less where the number stands. 2.7 for every 1,000 lines of code. We need to say, if you want to know how many bugs you have, just print out your program, weigh it, a number of grams, you'll get a pretty good estimate of how many bugs you have. But the reason it fails is not because of those bugs, because you always have bugs. The reason it fails is because you have those bugs, you release the software, people started using it, and they said it is lousy software. And it's the way you manage your users, the way you manage your clientele, that will determine whether your software will be a successful project or not. I mean, it is imperative that you write good software. It's important you don't have bugs in it, but you will always have bugs in it. It will never do what the user wants it to do. Let's give you an idea. I'm not saying how they teach computer sciences today, but imagine that you are a programmer in a small project, and the systems analyst gives you the documentation. Think about a 5,000-page document. And this is basically what the requirements are. This is what your client has signed for. This is what your company is being paid to manufacture. How many users do you think actually read that document before they signed it? Let's take a vote. How many think actually? 0. Okay, you're pretty close, yes. I mean, many people read it, each one read their one segment, or half a chapter, which relates to what they do. Nobody actually read the entire process itself. Which means by the time you release the software, it is not what your user wants. It might be exactly what the requirements document said, but it is not what your client wants. And you're now in a position, either as a programmer or later on as a project manager, which is where I'm trying to convince the MIS also, where you need to go back to your client and tell them, look, I delivered what you signed for, why aren't you paying it for? why aren't you paying me? You can't do that, okay? It doesn't work that way. You need to know how to manage your users, your paying clients also, in such a way that when you release the software, despite the fact it does not do what they want it to do, even though you did exactly what they asked you, that they will nonetheless be happy with the software that you have given. That's where MIS comes in. One aspect of it. Okay? It's not only about developing the software. It's about managing the release of the software into the organization that it's going to be used. Believe me, no matter how good your software is, I'm certain it is, if it's not used, it is useless. And making that transition from good software to used software is where MIS comes in. Point number one. Point number two, you have this large project, and you have all these computer science guys who are writing the software for you, and it's like herding cats. In case you're not familiar with yourselves yet, you are not like regular employees of a company. If you are real programmers, and not just coders, if you are real programmers, then you are artists. You take pride in what you create. You don't write the software because you get paid by the hour. You write the software because you are creating your own Pygmalion. But if you don't feel so right now, drop computer sciences. Okay? Because you're not in the right department. But if you are in the department, and you're here because you are creative, you want to create a new object, then the next phase in your career will be when you become the project manager. How do you become a project manager when you have all these prima donnas all around you? Each one is an artist thinking what he or she is doing is the most important thing in the world. How do you manage these guys? Okay? Now, you won't learn that in computer sciences. Okay? But if your computer sciences stay there, if you chose this profession because you are geeks, it's a great profession. Believe me, there is no greater pleasure in the world than writing a good software package and seeing it run afterwards. Okay? If you enjoy it, you're in the right place. But at a certain stage in your career, 5 years later, maybe 2 years later, maybe 10 years later, you'll become a project manager. What do you do then? How do you manage all these mysterious guys who like developing their own software, their own art? What do you do then? How do you manage them? Okay? This is where MIS comes in also. There's another aspect that you want to be familiar with at this stage in your career. You don't want to be in a position where you go and take an MBA later on because you don't know how to go about doing it. You'll be too late then. So that's the second aspect. To give you an idea how terrible it is to manage people like me, when I took my first position, I was in a coaching. I was being coached by a senior programmer. Let's make sure that I did things correctly and so on. And I was still writing in assembly, IBM assembly at the time. Okay? In case you don't know what IBM assembly looks like, it's the best language in the world. The only thing better than IBM assembly is reading machine code. But we gave up that a long time ago. So I was working in assembly, and I had to write this small program which would convert data from one format to the other, and I knew I was going to be checked. And I knew that the guy checking me would go through all the usual routine of going line by line, why do you do it this way, why not that way, why do you not document it, by the way, properly and so on. So I took the IBM's Struble book, I don't know if you guys study it anymore, but Struble wrote all the IBM mainframe assembly code. And you look at the book and you can find every single command there, including how to hack into the mainframe's operating system, which you also did. That's not to be discussed later on. And I knew this was going to happen, so I went to the book, I found the least used command, one of the least used commands. I wrote all the program around this one command. So the guy then started looking at the code so he could test me, and he couldn't test me because he didn't know what the command was doing. It's one of those things you just don't see anywhere. I mean, it's one of those obscure commands that just don't exist unless you're writing that very specific kind of an application. It's kind of almost the machine code done specifically for a kind of operation which is never usually done, but for when it has to be done, the performance has to be optimal, so you have a unique mnemonic in assembly for doing it that way. Now, all the program that way, you know what happened? Nobody ever managed me afterwards, which is a terrible thing for me and for everybody else also. So if you want to avoid such situations, you need to know how to manage people like us. Managing people like us is not easy. believe me, it is not easy. Have pity on the person who is your project manager later on, because that's the kind of people that they are going to face. How do you manage these guys? Again, the same story. You need to take something beyond computer science. So if you're looking at it from those perspectives, think a few years ahead. Not just about writing their own code, not only about enjoying yourself, writing all this brilliant code nobody else understands. Not only about seeing whether you can write the same code in 90 lines of code instead of 120 lines of code. You want to manage those two aspects, you need to take a few management courses. Preferably management of information systems courses. Thirdly, you want to develop your software. Okay? Now in the industry you usually get paid for developing software for somebody else. How do you know what the other person needs? No, you don't read the documentation. It's never right. Well, that's the first step, you're right. You talk to people, okay? But it's not easy either, because you know what? They don't know what they want. In fact, even when they know what they want, it's not what they want. So it's a whole skill here.
So I would say just to try to understand the problem that they're having and then try to figure out how to solve it from that point.
Partly, yes, that too. Okay? But this psychology of how you talk to a client, how you extract out of them what they really need. And by the way, you're going to have conflicting opinions. Right? Not only do the people using the software, or those who will need to use the software, or your specific addition to it, have different ideas of what it's all about than those who are actually paying for it, I senior management, but even the same users will think differently about what they actually need. You're in a position here where you're not actually developing software only. You're in a position of cajoling your users into actually wanting to use it, into making them want to use that system. Now, there's a whole array of different talents you need to have here. Partly it's your ability to be able to do systems analysis and design. I don't know if you study that in computer sciences, or do you? Okay, you don't. Okay, we teach it in the MIS courses. So you need to know how to take the case study that the users are telling you, and it won't be one, it will be a set of conflicting case studies about the same issue, and to somehow integrate them into one diagram, which you can then tell back to the users and convince them this is what they actually want. Okay, doing that, and that's the preliminary stage before you actually start writing the software itself. Again, this is the MIS side of things. Once you have done it, again, convincing that they want to use it and they actually want to sign off on it is again what MIS is all about. Okay, so what you're doing with the sciences, guys, coming from your side of things is crucial. Okay? But you can't release the software based upon computer sciences alone, not always. You need that extra phase of an interaction between computer sciences on the one hand and the organization that uses it on the other, which is where MIS fits in, and which is where I'd like to recommend that you take several of our courses. Again, I'm not asking you or not suggesting even that you switch from computer sciences to anything else. Okay? I know what your mindset is. I was there myself. Okay? If you like programming, you're in the right place. But the next phase beyond that, you want to think about taking a course in systems analysis and design. You want to consider taking a course in outsourcing management. A lot of the industry today, unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons, are outsourcing. Now, it's not that outsourcing is wrong, by the way. We did outsourcing in the industry in the 1970s also. We didn't call it outsourcing, we did outsourcing then. We did it very differently from the way it is done today. It's not outsourcing is bad, but if it's done wrongly, it is terrible. If it's done correctly, it's brilliant. Again, how to manage this outsourcing relationship. Okay? This is again MIS. How you manage it within your own organization. How do you manage it as the CIO of a company when you need to tell your own IT team that you're going to outsource part of what they're doing? How do you do it? I mean, it's not a matter of telling them I'm going to outsource and that's it. Right? It's a matter of